Y'all see that? Y'all see that slight at Stephanie White? He says she has the right player, but she don't got the right coach. Caitlin Clark need her Phil Jackson. That's what we need. We need Lisa Bluter, bro. Lisa Bluter was Caitlin Clark Phil Jackson. That's why everything was so good in Iowa. That was her Phil Jackson. The Indiana Fever front office need to do everything in their power to...
The entire Caitlin Clark conversation explodes the moment Colin Cowherd drags the Indiana Fever coaching situation into the spotlight, and suddenly Stephanie White is no longer just a name on a clipboard. She becomes the center of a growing storm surrounding Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark, in the middle of her third WNBA season narrative arc, is being framed as something larger than just a scorer. Caitlin Clark is being positioned as a generational force, a player who has already rewritten expectations around scoring, passing, and pace. Yet the tension builds around whether Caitlin Clark is being fully unlocked inside Indiana Fever systems. Colin Cowherd amplifies what fans have been whispering about Caitlin Clark, that her impact is being limited by structure rather than talent. Caitlin Clark continues producing elite scoring outputs, Caitlin Clark continues stacking assists, and Caitlin Clark continues carrying offensive pressure in every possession. But the conversation shifts violently when Stephanie White enters the discussion. Stephanie White becomes the focal point of whether Caitlin Clark is being developed into a championship-level force or simply managed as a high-volume rookie star. Caitlin Clark supporters begin drawing comparisons, arguing that Caitlin Clark needs a coaching identity that mirrors elite NBA development systems. Caitlin Clark is compared to legends. Caitlin Clark is framed through Jordan-level expectations, and Caitlin Clark is now placed inside a debate about coaching ceilings versus player ceilings. Colin Cowherd's comments ignite the narrative that Caitlin Clark is already ahead of her system. Caitlin Clark is no longer just a rookie story. Caitlin Clark is now a franchise architecture problem.
So Caitlin Clark, third season in the WNBA, has already set the record. She had another game in which she had at least 20 points and 10 assists. And I have been saying when she broke into the league, people said her comp is Steph Curry. Now, I think stylistically, the way she plays her game has got some Steph Curry. I think, though, in terms of an iconic player, she's more Michael Jordan. So Jordan...
What did he say? Michael Jordan.
Caitlin Clark's evolution into a third-season superstar narrative becomes the foundation of the entire debate. Caitlin Clark is described as a player who has already set records. Caitlin Clark is producing 20-point, 10-assist performances, and Caitlin Clark is steadily reshaping expectations for guards in the WNBA. Caitlin Clark is now placed inside a historical comparison framework. Caitlin Clark is not just compared to shooters or facilitators. Caitlin Clark is compared to Michael Jordan. That comparison reshapes everything around Caitlin Clark's trajectory. Colin Cowherd positions Caitlin Clark as more than a stylistic resemblance to Steph Curry. Caitlin Clark becomes a Jordan-level projection, meaning Caitlin Clark is now judged by championships, leadership arcs, and franchise transformation. Caitlin Clark's rookie to sophomore to third-year progression is framed like Jordan's early Bulls timeline. Caitlin Clark enters as a sensation, Caitlin Clark faces injury interruptions, and Caitlin Clark returns with elevated dominance. That narrative places Caitlin Clark into a developmental blueprint that demands elite coaching support. Caitlin Clark's statistical dominance is no longer questioned. Caitlin Clark's scoring is elite. Caitlin Clark's playmaking is elite. But Caitlin Clark's playoff success becomes the missing piece. That missing piece becomes the exact pressure point surrounding Stephanie White. Caitlin Clark is now viewed through the lens of unlocking potential versus maximizing legacy. Caitlin Clark supporters begin arguing that Caitlin Clark already has superstar output, but Caitlin Clark needs structural refinement to convert dominance into titles.
Jordan walked into the NBA, he was a rookie sensation. Year 2, he got hurt. Year 3, he was like the best player in the league, arguably, and he then needed his Pippen, got it in year 4. So Caitlin comes into the league, rookie sensation. Year 2, last year she's hurt. Year 3, okay, her stats are great again. When is she going to start winning at the next level? She has not won a playoff series yet. And so my take is she has her Pippen.
Caitlin Clark's trajectory is now fully mapped onto Michael Jordan's early career structure. Caitlin Clark is being evaluated through the lens of progression, rookie impact, sophomore adversity, and third-year dominance. Caitlin Clark's Jordan comparison creates a new expectation. Caitlin Clark must not only perform, Caitlin Clark must win. Caitlin Clark must evolve from statistical dominance into playoff control. Caitlin Clark must become a franchise finisher. Caitlin Clark is then paired with the concept of a Pippen, and in this narrative, Caitlin Clark's running mate becomes essential to unlocking postseason success. Caitlin Clark is linked with Kelsey Mitchell as part of that supporting structure, suggesting Caitlin Clark cannot carry championship burden alone. Caitlin Clark's development is no longer just about scoring range or logo threes. Caitlin Clark is now evaluated on leadership tempo, clutch control, and postseason execution. Caitlin Clark's biggest challenge becomes adaptation, not talent. Caitlin Clark is already producing elite numbers, but Caitlin Clark is being measured against the highest historical ceiling in basketball comparisons. Caitlin Clark's situation is compared to eras of NBA transformation, where young stars needed elite coaching systems to translate dominance into championships. Caitlin Clark's narrative is now tied to coaching philosophy, offensive spacing, and late-game execution design. This is where Stephanie White becomes central again. Caitlin Clark's ceiling is being directly tied to whether Stephanie White can evolve tactical systems fast enough to match Caitlin Clark's pace and range. Caitlin Clark is no longer just developing. Caitlin Clark is waiting for system alignment.
Comparing to the WNBA, leaders in assists, Nikola Jokic, about 10 assists a game, 4 turnovers a game. Kate Cunningham, who I know is playing a big Game 7 tonight, about 9.5 assists per game, 4 turnovers a game. So, calm down, everybody.
When you're handling the ball,
all the time,
you are going to have some turnovers. But the question for you is, you read the comments?
Just when they're about other people.
That's a dangerous place to be.
Why are people?
Caitlin Clark's performance debate now shifts into analytics and perception warfare. Caitlin Clark's turnovers become a headline talking point, but Caitlin Clark's assist volume places her alongside elite NBA-level facilitators. Caitlin Clark is statistically compared with top-tier creators, where turnover rates naturally rise with high usage. Caitlin Clark is producing near double-digit assists while maintaining scoring leadership, and Caitlin Clark is being judged under microscopic scrutiny. Caitlin Clark's narrative tension grows because media framing does not always match statistical context. Caitlin Clark is criticized for mistakes that are common among high-usage guards, yet Caitlin Clark's overall impact remains historically significant. Caitlin Clark's supporters argue that criticism of turnovers ignores context. Caitlin Clark is handling primary creation duties. Caitlin Clark is initiating offense every possession, and Caitlin Clark is absorbing defensive pressure unmatched in most rookie-to-star transitions. Caitlin Clark's franchise impact is also financial and cultural. Caitlin Clark drives viewership spikes. Caitlin Clark shifts arena attendance dynamics, and Caitlin Clark reshapes broadcast narratives every time she plays. Caitlin Clark now sits at the intersection of performance and perception. Caitlin Clark's greatness is no longer debated in isolation. It is debated through coaching decisions, roster balance, and system design. This creates the climax of the entire debate. If Caitlin Clark is already producing elite output, then the difference between winning and losing becomes system execution. That system execution circles back again to Stephanie White. Caitlin Clark is now the center of a franchise identity battle. Caitlin Clark's story is no longer just about scoring, assists, or highlight moments. Caitlin Clark's story has become a structural debate about coaching, system design, and championship readiness. Colin Cowherd's comments have intensified the pressure around Stephanie White, placing Caitlin Clark's development under a microscope of expectations that extend beyond individual brilliance. Caitlin Clark continues to produce at an elite level, but Caitlin Clark's legacy will ultimately depend on how quickly the Indiana Fever system evolves around her. Caitlin Clark is already performing like a superstar. The question now is whether Caitlin Clark is being coached like a future champion. So the real question becomes, is Caitlin Clark being limited by development, or is Caitlin Clark about to force the entire league to adapt around her?